The galaxy was burning. It began slowly, like a storm on the edge of the stars. First, a few colonies went silent. Then entire systems disappeared from contact. At first, no one believed the reports. The galaxy was old, filled with ancient empires, and people thought nothing could truly threaten them. But soon the truth became impossible to hide. The Vorath swarm had arrived. They were not like any other species. They did not send diplomats, they did not make alliances, and they did not want slaves. They wanted only to consume. Every world they touched was devoured. Cities, oceans, forests, even the very stone of planets, if it could be used for their endless hunger. They came like a living tide, countless ships moving with one mind, one purpose. At first, the great alien empires tried to fight back. The Zorathi Confederation, masters of plasma cannons, sent their fleets. The Valari Ascendancy, proud and ancient, unleashed their crystal warships. Even the Threx Dominion, feared for their merciless armies, tried to resist. They all failed. The Vorath did not fight like other species. They did not fear death because every ship, every drone, every soldier was part of the hive. To destroy one meant nothing. There were always more. They learned, they adapted, and with each battle, they grew stronger. Soon, entire star nations began to collapse. The Zorathi homeworld burned. The Valari capital was stripped bare, its shining towers torn down by the swarm's claws. The Threx themselves, once seen as monsters, fled into the dark edges of the galaxy. One by one, species abandoned their homes. The Galactic Council, a place once filled with proud leaders and endless debate, turned into a hall of panic. Every meeting ended with the same words: "We cannot hold. We must evacuate." And so the great exodus began. Millions of ships, carrying billions of lives, streamed away from the war front. They fled toward the galactic core, where the swarm had not yet reached. Refugee fleets filled space like rivers of light, but behind them the swarm followed. It was during this time that humanity listened and watched. Humans were not the most advanced race. In fact, by galactic standards they were young, only a few centuries into spaceflight compared to millennia of alien rule. Earth was small, its colonies scattered. The Galactic Council barely noticed them, except to remind them to stay quiet and follow orders. But when the exodus began, humanity faced a choice. At the council, alien leaders spoke with fear in their voices. The High Speaker of the Valari, his once golden skin pale with shame, said, "Run, save your people. The swarm cannot be stopped. To remain is death." The human representative, Admiral Marcus Hale, stood at the center of the chamber. His uniform was plain compared to the flowing robes and shining armor of others, but his voice carried weight. "You're saying the galaxy is lost?" "It is already lost," the Threx delegate hissed. His mandibles clicked nervously. "We fight and we die. Better to flee and live." Marcus looked around the chamber. Dozens of alien eyes refused to meet his. Their pride was broken, their hope gone. For them, survival meant running. But humanity remembered something different. On Earth, history was written in blood and fire. Humanity had faced wars, invasions, plagues, and disasters. They had fought when outnumbered, rebuilt when destroyed, and endured when all logic said they should fall. Running was never the human way. Admiral Hale's voice grew hard. "Maybe you can run, but humanity won't." The chamber erupted in protest. Alien voices shouted, calling him mad, calling humans fools. But Marcus did not back down. "If we run now, there will be nowhere left to run tomorrow. We will hold the line." And with those words, humanity made its choice. Back on Earth, the decision spread quickly. News networks reported the Council's retreat, the exodus of alien empires, and humanity's vow to fight. Some were afraid. Families begged the government to evacuate. But others, millions of others, felt something different. Anger. Humanity had fought too hard to climb to the stars just to abandon them. Factories on Mars began producing weapons at a pace never seen before. Shipyards around Jupiter worked day and night to arm every vessel that could fly. Old freighters were converted into warships, asteroid mines into fortresses. Even civilian ships were fitted with weapons. Every nation on Earth, divided so often in the past, united now with one purpose. The message was clear. If the swarm came, they would meet humanity in battle. The first test came soon. The swarm pushed into the Dracian sector, a cluster of colonies once belonging to an alien empire that had already fled. When their warships arrived, they expected only empty worlds. Instead, they found humanity waiting. The first Terran fleet, under Admiral Hale himself, blocked the system. Human ships were smaller, weaker, and fewer than the swarms. By all reason, the humans should have retreated, but they did not. When the swarm advanced, humanity attacked. The battle was chaos. Swarm ships poured in like an endless tide, but humans fought with strategies no other species dared use. They laid traps inside asteroid fields, luring the swarm into narrow kill zones. They detonated nuclear mines hidden inside derelict stations, turning the swarm's numbers against them. Pilots flew their fighters into suicidal dives, cutting deep into the swarm's formation before going down. For every human ship destroyed, 10 swarm vessels burned. For every colony lost, the swarm paid with rivers of its own dead. The Vorath had never seen such resistance. Their hive mind trembled with confusion. This species, this small young race, was not fleeing like the others. They were fighting as if every battle was their last, and in many ways it was. Across the galaxy, the news spread like wildfire. Alien refugees listened in disbelief. On stations far from the front, screens showed human warships holding against impossible odds. In council chambers, leaders whispered, "The humans, they are still fighting?" Some mocked it as madness. Others called it suicide. But deep inside, many felt something else. Shame. Because while they fled, humanity stood. At night on Earth, people looked up at the stars and knew their sons and daughters were out there, holding the line. Memorials rose quickly for the fallen, names etched into stone and steel. But with each death came more volunteers, more resolve. Humanity was not broken. The exodus continued. Alien fleets kept fleeing deeper into the galaxy's core. But behind them, the human fleets advanced toward the swarm, not away. The galaxy had abandoned the battlefield. But now, for the first time, the Vorath met an enemy that would not run. The part ended with a single, haunting sight. Alien ships streaming away. Like rivers of light and against the tide, human warships moving forward, straight into the oncoming darkness. The swarm did not stop. Even after their first losses, the Vorath returned in greater numbers. Their hive mind did not know fear. To them, defeat was only another lesson, another chance to adapt. Where other species would retreat to rebuild, the swarm pressed forward without end, but waiting for them was still humanity. The line at Epsilon Eridani. The Epsilon Eridani system was chosen as the next defense line. It was close to Earth, rich with colonies and filled with shipyards. If the swarm broke through here, they would reach humanity's heart. Admiral Marcus Hale knew the importance of this battle. The Council had begged him once again to retreat. The Valari envoy had sent a final message before fleeing deeper into the core. "Admiral Hale, you must understand. It is not cowardice, it is survival. Humanity cannot stand alone." But Marcus gave no reply. His fleets remained. At Epsilon, Eridani, hundreds of human ships gathered. They were not elegant like alien cruisers. Many were refitted cargo haulers, mining barges turned into fortresses, even passenger liners now armed with missile pods. Humanity had turned everything it could fly into a weapon. When the swarm arrived, it was like the sky itself turned black. Thousands of Vorath warships, each one alive with writhing movement, poured into the system. Their hulls shifted and pulsed, grown from living biometal. From a distance, it looked less like a fleet and more like a sea of shadows swallowing the stars. Human commanders did not flinch. Orders were given. The line held. The first engagement. The battle began with swarm drones pouring ahead of the fleet, countless small ships meant to overwhelm defenses. They swarmed like insects, blotting out sensors. Human warships responded with discipline. Railguns fired slugs the size of buses, cutting through waves of drones. Missile salvos exploded among the swarm, scattering them into pieces. Laser arrays swept through the black tide, burning paths of fire in the void. But the swarm kept coming. For every one destroyed, 10 more appeared. Their numbers were endless. Aboard the human flagship Resolute, Admiral Hale stood tall. His face was lined with fatigue, but his voice carried steady over the comms. Hold your ground. Make them pay for every meter. Humanity does not retreat. Desperate tactics. The Vorath were confused at first. Other species, when faced with such odds, would have broken and fled. But humanity fought like cornered wolves. They used the battlefield itself as a weapon. Old mining stations were rigged with explosives, waiting like traps. When the swarm tried to use them for cover, the stations detonated, destroying hundreds of ships at once. Civilian freighters, too slow to escape, volunteered as decoys. Crews locked their ships on collision courses and rammed into swarm carriers, detonating their cores in blinding fireballs. Asteroid belts became death zones. Human fighters lured the swarm into narrow passages, then unleashed hidden railgun platforms. The rocks themselves were used as ammunition, flung into the swarm's formations. Everywhere, humanity turned desperation into strategy, but the cost was heavy. The price of holding hours turned into days. Battles raged across the system. Human fleets were scattered, regrouped, and scattered again. Every victory came with sacrifice. On the second day, the Vanguard was overrun. Its captain, Commander Reyes, ordered his crew to stay at their posts while he steered the crippled ship into the heart of a swarm carrier. The explosion tore both ships apart, saving the rest of the fleet. His name was etched into every human transmission after that. Remember Reyes, hold the line. On the third day, orbital defenses around Epsilon Prime were breached. Swarm spores rained down on the planet, devouring everything they touched. Civilians armed themselves with rifles and fought street to street. Entire cities burned, but still, they resisted. By the fourth day, only half of the first Terran fleet remained intact, yet the swarm had lost more ships in this single battle than in their entire campaign against the Valari. For the first time in their history, the hive mind hesitated. Humanity was teaching the swarm something new: fear. Watching eyes across the galaxy, refugees listened. On distant stations, alien families huddled around news screens showing human warships still holding at Epsilon Eridani. The broadcast carried voices of human commanders rallying their people, voices filled with defiance, not despair. A young Valari child asked her father, "Why do they fight when we did not?" The father had no answer. Among the Threks, once proud, warriors' shame spread like a sickness. Their generals avoided the topic, but whispers grew. The humans fight for our worlds while we hide. Even the Galactic Council, now far from danger, could not ignore it. Their reports admitted the unthinkable. Humanity, a young race with little technology, had inflicted more damage on the swarm than all ancient empires combined. Still, most leaders shook their heads. "They are brave," one said, "but they will die." The turning point on the fifth day, the swarm launched its largest assault. Entire fleets converged on the human flagship Resolute. The hive mind sought to crush the human command and break their will once and for all. Admiral Hale stood at the bridge watching the tide of enemy ships. His officers looked to him for orders. He spoke calmly. "Signal every ship. This is the line. If they want Earth, they must come through us first." The battle that followed was chaos beyond description. Human ships collided with swarm vessels in desperate charges. Fighters weaved between colossal biocruisers, planting nuclear warheads before vanishing in flames. Orbital guns fired until their barrels melted. Planetside batteries hurled stones into orbit. Every piece of rock turned. into a weapon. The Resolute itself took blow after blow, its hull torn open, decks burning. But still it fired, still it led. And then, something happened that no one expected. The swarm began to fall back. Not far, not in full retreat, but enough. The hive mind, for the first time in its endless hunger, pulled its forces away from a target. Humanity had bled it too deeply. The swarm needed to regroup. The Battle of Epsilon Eridani ended not with victory, but with survival. Humanity still stood. The message in. The silence that followed as wreckage drifted across the system and stars glowed through the smoke of war. Admiral Hale recorded a message. To all species of the galaxy, he said, his voice carrying across every channel. You ran. You called the swarm unstoppable. But look at Epsilon Eridani. Look at the line we held. Humanity will not run. We will not hide. If the galaxy will not fight for itself, then humanity will fight for it. His words spread across space like fire. Refugees wept. Soldiers of alien armies clenched their fists in shame. For the first time, the galaxy realized a young race, a race they had mocked as primitive, was carrying the weight of survival alone. The swarm's anger, but the Vorath did not forget. Their hive mind pulsed. With fury, humanity was unlike the others. Humanity was dangerous. The swarm began to focus more and more of its fleets toward human space. The hive whispered one command to itself, endless and cold. Consume them. Consume the humans first. Humanity had stood alone at Epsilon Eridani. They had survived. But the Asayam swarm was coming back, stronger, larger, and angrier than ever. The swarm was angry. The Vorath hive mind had never known such resistance. Entire civilizations had fallen before it, their fleets broken, their worlds stripped. But humanity had not only stood at Epsilon Eridani, they had forced the swarm to pull back. For the first time, the hive felt something new. It was not fear, not yet. But it was close. The answer was simple. Humanity must be destroyed. The storm returns. Months passed. Humanity rebuilt what it could, but the scars of battle were everywhere. Shipyards around Jupiter worked day and night, turning wreckage into new warships. Families mourned, but still they volunteered their sons and daughters. Every colony understood. The truth, survival meant sacrifice, and then the swarm returned. This time it was not a single fleet. It was an ocean. Thousands upon thousands of Vorath warships poured into human space, spreading across sectors like a black tide. Their drones filled the void. Their spores rained down on colonies. Their carriers vomited endless streams of warriors. Admiral Hale gathered his commanders. On the holotable before them, red marks of enemy fleets stretched across half the map. Humanity was outnumbered 100-1. One of his captains, a young woman named Arya Chen, asked the question all feared. Admiral, can we hold? Marcus. Hale looked at the map, then at his officers. His face was tired, but his voice was steady. No, not everywhere. But we will hold where it matters. Every hour we delay them is another hour for our people to prepare. Every life we spend buys time. And so the orders were given. The burning of New Avalon. The first world to fall was New Avalon, a jewel of human colonies. Its skies burned with swarm spores, its cities drowned in black rivers of creatures. The local militia fought bravely, turning skyscrapers into bunkers, rivers into trenches. Civilians armed themselves with hunting rifles, kitchen knives, anything that could kill. For 3 days, New Avalon resisted. On the 4th, when the swarm breached the central command, Governor Elias broadcast a final message across all human channels. Remember us. Remember that we did not bow. Fight for every world as we fought for ours. Moments later, the swarm consumed him and his city. New Avalon was gone, but his words spread like fire. Across the colonies, people swore they would not go quietly. Weapons of desperation. Humanity could not match the swarm's numbers, but they had something the swarm did not. Imagination. At the Battle of Vega, Human engineers detonated a star's outer layer using experimental fusion bombs, creating a solar flare that burned half the swarm fleet. At Orion's edge, human marines boarded enemy carriers with nuclear backpacks, sacrificing themselves to detonate inside the monsters' hearts. Even civilian ships played their part. In the asteroid run of Procyon, a convoy of miners volunteered to crash their rigs into swarm dreadnoughts, tearing them apart in suicidal charges. Their families wept, but their names became legend. Every weapon, no matter how desperate, was used. Humanity turned the galaxy itself into a battlefield, but each victory cost blood. The Battle of Sirius. The greatest test came at Sirius, Earth's brightest neighbor. The swarm descended with a force larger than anything seen before. Human fleets gathered, battered and scarred from months of war. Ships held together by welded plates, cannons running hot from overuse, crews exhausted from endless battles. Yet they stood. The battle raged for days. Swarm warships pressed on all sides, trying to crush humanity in one final blow. The void was filled with fire and wreckage. Entire fleets were wiped out in hours. On the second day, the carrier Indomitable was torn apart. Instead of surrendering, its captain rammed the burning wreck into the swarm flagship, destroying both. On the third, ground forces on Sirius Prime fought in the streets. Tanks rolled over rivers of black flesh. Infantry fired until their barrels melted. Civilians threw Molotovs from rooftops. Cities turned to ruins, but the swarm paid in mountains of corpses. By the fourth day, Admiral Hale sent a message to Earth. His face was bloodied, his uniform torn, but his voice carried clear. If this is our last stand, then let it be one the swarm never forgets. The alien delegation is. Sirius burned, a strange thing happened. A small alien ship slipped through the battle and landed on the Resolute. From it emerged a delegation of species who had fled months ago, Velari, Threx, and Zorathi among them. They bowed their heads in shame before Admiral Hale. One of them, a Velari elder, spoke. Why, human? Why do you fight when all logic says you cannot win? We ran because we wished to survive. Yet you choose death. Hale looked at them, with cold eyes. We don't fight because we expect to win. We fight because if we run, there will be nowhere left to run tomorrow. Someone has to stand. We chose to be that someone. The aliens had no answer. They left in silence, their hearts heavy with guilt. But seeds of something new had been planted. For the first time, they wondered if they too had been wrong to flee. Humanity bleeds. By the end of the Sirius campaign, humanity still held the system, but at a terrible cost. Half of the fleet was gone. Millions lay dead across colonies. Entire cities were nothing but ash. Families mourned without bodies to bury. On Earth, black banners filled the skies as names of the fallen scrolled endlessly across memorial walls. Children grew up knowing their parents had died for the galaxy. Entire generations became soldiers before they could vote. But despite the loss, humanity did not break. Factories kept building, shipyards kept launching, volunteers kept coming, and every human knew the truth. They were holding the line not just for themselves, but for every cowardly empire that had abandoned the stars. The swarm's realization, the Vorath hive mind seethed. The humans were unlike any foe it had faced. They did not surrender, they did not break, and they did not accept defeat. Even when devoured, they resisted. Even when planets fell, they turned ruins into weapons. The swarm began to realize something dangerous. Humanity could not be erased like the others. To consume them would cost more than expected. And worse, their defiance was spreading. The hive saw whispers in the dark, alien fleets stirring, refugees muttering about return. Humanity's fire was catching. The price paid in the ruins of Sirius. Admiral Hale stood on the bridge of the Resolute. His fleet drifted among wreckage, surrounded by silence and burning stars. He knew the truth. Humanity could not keep this up forever. Every battle bled them dry. Every victory was built on sacrifice. The price of defiance was unbearable. And yet, it was necessary. He looked out into the void and whispered, not to his crew, but to history itself. We will pay the price. whatever it takes. The ending of Part 3. The galaxy watched as humanity bled. They saw the swarm still coming, endless and hungry. They saw human worlds burning, human fleets shattered, human people sacrificed. But they also saw something greater. They saw a race that refused to surrender, a race that fought not only for itself, but for everyone else, a race that stood alone when all others fled. The galaxy had watched in fear. For months, human fleets had stood alone against the Vorath swarm. Worlds burned, ships were lost. Millions of human lives were spent buying time while other species fled. The galaxy had abandoned them, leaving them to face a tide of destruction alone. And yet, humanity survived. Seeds of change. Far across the stars, hidden fleets of alien refugees watched reports of human battles. They had fled, abandoning their homes, leaving colonies undefended. They had convinced themselves it was survival, but guilt gnawed at them. On the station Ardani Prime, a Valari officer whispered to a fellow commander, "They fight for everything we abandoned. Can we continue hiding?" The other shook his head. "We are weak, untrained. They will burn us if we try to return." Yet the seed was planted. The thought of humanity standing alone, refusing to yield, stirred something deep in them. Courage long forgotten began to reawaken. First returns. The first species to dare return were small groups, pilots and engineers, refugees who had no home left to run to. They brought ships, weapons, and hope. They sought out human fleets, not to command but to fight alongside. Human commanders were wary at first. Trust had been broken. Many feared betrayal. But the first alien ships fought bravely, giving their lives beside humans, saving human crews in desperate moments. News spread quickly. The first fleets of alien species had returned to the front. Training. In human ways, humanity had learned a bitter truth. The galaxy did not fight like humans. Alien species often depended on sheer numbers, rigid formations, or advanced technology. They lacked the flexibility and resolve humans had developed from centuries of survival. Admiral Marcus Hale knew the opportunity was rare. The returning alien fleets would not survive long unless they learned human tactics. On the bridge of the Resolute, Hale addressed the alien officers. "Your ships are strong, but your strategies are weak. Adapt. Fight like humans fight. Observe. Improvise, never give up. We do not wait for orders from fleets we do not trust. We act, we survive, and then we strike." The aliens hesitated. Many had never fought like this before. But under human guidance, they adapted. They learned to use terrain, to set ambushes, to make every loss count. Within weeks, a small, deadly alliance of humans and aliens had formed. Daitiu, counterstrike begins. With combined fleets, the humans began to take the fight to the Vorath. The first major battle was at Terra Sector, a collection of small colonies recently abandoned. The swarm believed the sector would be easy to conquer. Instead, they were met with a united force of human and alien ships. The swarm pushed forward, confident in their numbers. Then the human aliens struck. Mines hidden in asteroid belts exploded. Fighters led kamikaze runs into swarm carriers. Heavy ships used gravitational fields to fling asteroids into enemy formations. The swarm was stunned. For the first time, they faced resistance that was organized, relentless, and intelligent. They were losing ground, system by system. Inspiration spreads across the galaxy, the news traveled. The Valari, Threx, and Zorathi, who had fled months ago, began to hear whispers among their soldiers. If humans can stand, why can't we? Small fleets began leaving their safe zones. Refugees began to return. Colonies that had been abandoned for months were being reoccupied and fortified. Humanity's courage had lit a spark in the galaxy, a spark of hope, pride, and responsibility. Even the Galactic Council, now scattered and weakened, could not ignore the change. They began coordinating with human commanders, sending advisors, engineers, and volunteers. Battles of the reclaimed systems. The next months were brutal. Systems that had once fallen to the swarm were contested again. Humanity led the way, with alien allies following. At Aurora Prime, humans trained Valari engineers to deploy planetary railguns within hours, using terrain to amplify firepower. Swarm ships moved into the system expecting easy victory, and were shredded in the gravitational traps. On Rathos Minor, Threx shock troops, taught by human veterans, fought through swarm-controlled cities with precision and courage, clearing entire sectors in a matter of days. Each victory inspired more aliens to return. Every battle was bloody, but every victory demonstrated that the galaxy could fight, if it fought together, with human determination leading the way. The swarm grows wary. The Vorath hive mind, vast and relentless, sensed the change. Systems that once fell easily were no longer surrendering. Their fleets were being destroyed, their spores burned before they could take root. The hive hesitated. It was confused. It had never faced a species that not only resisted but inspired others to fight alongside them. Humanity's courage was contagious and dangerous. Every system reclaimed by humans and their allies was a wound to the swarm's mind, and they began focusing more resources on human space. But with every attack, the humans struck back harder. The bond of allies as battles continued. Humans and aliens developed trust forged in fire. Alien pilots flew alongside human squadrons in perfect coordination. Ground troops learned each other's tactics. Engineers shared technology. Even languages became shared, simplified to allow quick commands in the chaos of battle. Admiral Hale often addressed the combined fleets. "We do not fight as humans and aliens. We fight as one. The swarm is not only attacking humanity, it is attacking the galaxy itself, and we will not let it win." The fleets cheered in unison. The galaxy, for the first time in centuries, felt united. The Battle of Oran's Gate. The decisive engagement of this period came at Oran's Gate, a choke point where the swarm intended to pour into the heart of human territory. The combined fleets waited in orbit. Thousands of ships, human and alien, ready to strike. Every tactic humanity had learned and taught was employed. Traps in asteroid belts, kamikaze attacks, stealth fighters hidden in gas clouds. The swarm poured in, confident in numbers, but the humans and their allies moved like one organism. Ships that looked fragile carried devastating firepower. Drones were destroyed before they could reach human lines. Swarm carriers were crippled by gravity flares. For days, the battle raged. The galaxy held its breath. Then slowly the tide turned. The swarm began to retreat, not in panic but in careful withdrawal. They had learned that victory over humans, and their new allies, was not easy. Every step forward cost too much. A new hope. When the smoke cleared, the galaxy looked at the results. Systems reclaimed, ships repaired, survivors celebrating together. Humanity had not only survived, they had led the galaxy back into the fight. In council chambers across the stars, alien leaders whispered, "If the humans can fight like this, perhaps we can too." Refugees returned to colonies, rebuilding homes, markets, and schools. Soldiers trained the young and old alike. Humanity had shown them the way, proving that courage, determination, and sacrifice could change the course of war. Admiral Hale addressed the fleets once more. "The galaxy is waking. We have taken the first step. The swarm is strong, but we are stronger, together. Remember this. If we fight, we survive. If we stand united, we will win." The fleet roared back their approval. Ships lit up the void like stars reborn. The galaxy was no longer silent. Where once the stars had watched humanity struggle alone, now countless fleets of alien species had joined them. Systems that had burned in the first wave of the Vorath were rebuilt and fortified. Humanity's courage had awakened the galaxy, and the combined fleets were ready to strike back. But the Vorath were patient. They had seen this before. Retreat was temporary, regrouping inevitable. And now, they came again, hungrier and more numerous than ever. The final call on Earth, Admiral Marcus Hale addressed the combined human-alien command. Ships of every size and shape filled orbital stations, decks alive with tension and purpose. "We face the swarm one last time," Hale said, his voice steady, echoing across thousands of channels. "We know their numbers, we know their strength, but we also know our courage, our resolve, and our unity. Today we strike not only for humanity, but for every world in this galaxy. Today, we fight to end this war." The commanders nodded. Planets, stations, fleets, all prepared for the coming storm. Gathering the armies, every alien fleet had returned now. Valari cruisers, Threx shock carriers, Zorathi warships, and humans' own battered but deadly vessels formed a massive armada. For the first time, the galaxy's combined power rivaled the swarm in size. Even civilian volunteers were enlisted. Miners, traders, and engineers became crews for smaller vessels. Every human and alien knew that this battle would demand everything they had. Every life would matter. Hale reviewed the battle plans. The target was clear. The central hive world of the Vorath, a planet-sized fortress pulsating with life, biometal, and war machines. Destroy it, and the swarm would fracture. Delay, and the galaxy might fall. Into the heart of darkness. The fleet moved in silence through the void. Sensors picked up tendrils of the swarm stretching across sectors, waiting, testing, probing. The first attacks came from swarm drones, small but lethal. Human and alien fighters wove through them, destroying them before they could reach the main fleet. Massive carriers opened fire with gravity bombs and plasma arrays, tearing through the swarm's forward lines. The closer they came to the hive world, the more desperate the swarm became. Entire fleets tried to encircle the armada, but every maneuver was countered by combined human-alien tactics. Ambushes from asteroid fields, stealth strikes from hidden fighters, and synchronized volleys of missiles shredded the swarm's formations. Hale watched it all unfold on his bridge. He had seen countless battles, countless losses, yet this was different. This was not just survival. It was retribution. The ground assault. The fleet was only one part of the plan. The ground assault would be equally dangerous. Elite human shock. Troops alongside Valari and Threx forces were deployed in drop pods onto the surface of the hive world. The planet was alive, its surface moving with the Vorath's bioarchitecture, towers of living metal and organic spires that shifted like creatures. Fighting was brutal. Soldiers waded through streets covered with black, writhing spores. Swarm. Drones emerged from walls, from under rocks, from beneath the ground. Every step was a struggle. Every victory a small miracle. Captain Arya Chen led the first strike, her unit blasting through swarm fortresses, planting charges that would open paths for heavier forces. Each explosion shook the planet, cutting off reinforcements and turning the hive world into a battlefield of chaos. Sacrifices of glory. The battle demanded sacrifice. The human ship, Indomitable II, collided with a massive swarm carrier, tearing it apart but losing itself in the explosion. Scores of alien crews followed human pilots in kamikaze runs to cripple swarm warships. On the planet, soldiers gave their lives to hold choke points long enough for others to advance. Even Admiral Hale risked everything, personally leading a strike, squad through the outer defenses of the swarm hive. Each step was deadly, each maneuver life-threatening, yet he pressed forward with the determination of someone who would not yield. The hive shakes. The swarm was faltering. For the first time, the hive world itself was under attack. The swarm's defenders, though numerous, could not contain the coordinated strike. Massive explosions tore through biometal towers. Ground forces cut through corridors of living architecture. Sensors aboard the human fleet picked up the hive's response. Confusion, frustration, and fear. The swarm had never encountered a species that refused to die, that led entire fleets and planets into battle against them, and that now commanded the allegiance of so many alien races. Hale spoke over the comms, his voice cutting through the chaos. "This is what courage looks like. This is what unity can do. Push forward. Today, we decide the fate of the galaxy. Turning the tide after days of relentless assault, the hive world began to collapse. Gravity fields destabilized, structures fell, and biometal towers tore themselves apart under human and alien bombardment. The swarm tried to retreat, but the fleet cut off their escape routes. One by one, Vorath carriers were destroyed. The hive world, once a symbol of unstoppable power, was reduced to ruins. From orbit, humans and aliens watched as the central heart of the swarm's power went dark. Silence replaced the roar of battle, and the stars beyond seemed to breathe again. Victory and reflection. The galaxy had survived. The swarm was broken, its mind fractured, its armies scattered. Humanity had not only fought for itself, but for every species that had fled in fear. The alien fleets now understood what the humans had known all along. Courage, determination, and unity could overcome even the most impossible odds. Admiral Hale addressed the surviving fleets one final time. The swarm came to consume us all. They thought the galaxy was theirs, but we stood together. We bled, we fought, and we survived. Humanity did not bring this victory alone. We brought it together. Every species, every soldier, every citizen who gave their life. This victory is yours. Across the galaxy, alien leaders bowed their heads in respect. For once, they spoke openly. If not for humanity, the galaxy would have been lost. They stood when all others fled. The price of survival. The victory was not without cost. Millions had died. Entire cities and colonies lay in ashes. The fleets that returned home were scarred, battered, and filled with survivors who carried the memory of friends, comrades, and families lost. But humanity endured. They rebuilt their worlds, repaired their ships, and honored their dead. And they did not stop there. They helped rebuild alien colonies, sharing technology, knowledge, and hope. The galaxy had changed. Fear no longer ruled. Unity and courage had proven stronger than terror. A new era in the aftermath, the Galactic Council convened again, this time not in fear but in respect. Humanity's leadership had saved billions of lives and countless civilizations. Alien leaders, once ashamed of their retreat, now spoke openly. We learned from humanity that courage is the galaxy's greatest weapon. From this day forward, we will not abandon one another. On Earth, children looked up at the stars and dreamed not of fleeing from threats, but of exploring, defending, and standing proud. Humanity had become a symbol, not of conquest, but of survival, unity, and the strength of the human spirit. Ending of the saga. The swarm would never return as it had before. Its forces were scattered, its hive mind fractured. Humanity and their allies had not only survived, they had forged a galaxy that would never forget the lesson. When all other species fled, humanity brought the battle. Admiral Hale stood on the bridge of the rebuilt Resolute, looking out into the stars. He saw fleets of humans and aliens alike, repairing, rebuilding, preparing for a future where the galaxy would stand united. He smiled quietly. Humanity had fought, had suffered, and had won, and the galaxy had learned something it would never forget. Courage was stronger than fear, unity stronger than despair, and humanity unstoppable. The stars were quiet now, but in that silence burned a light that would shine for generations to come.